It's like, yeah, that's gonna be this commercial. That show. Part of it.
Mr. Chairman, they used to was dragging stuff.
So I did sit back, listen to ours.
Great. Good to see you.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. If you don't know me, I'm Joe Heilman, Chair of this committee now, so appreciate the opportunity and it'll be a lot of fun. We have a lot on the calendar this morning, so I'm just gonna go ahead and get started, but just wanted to say thanks for the flexibility on the location change and thanks to AE2S for hosting us. And also a big thanks to the chamber staff. This now that I think all the fall events are firing up and September is kind of a crazy time. So thanks to them for all the flexibility. So I'm going to just turn it right over to Dwayne here with the Red River Water Supply and he'll give us an update on that project.
Thank you, man. Bring it up on the screen and I'll go through our slides. Okay, first slide, next one. Okay, so the Red River Valley Water Supply is passed by the legislature is an economic development initiative and a long-term emergency water supply. You'll know history of Fargo in 1934, the Red River, one of your major sources of water, zero flow for 5 months. And so this project was planned to 2075, going through population projections and talking to prospective users, and also modeled over a 30 style drought. So that's how we arrived at all the sizings and the modeling for the project was kind of the bookends, 30 style drought and population and business growth to 2075. It's a partnership between the state of North Dakota. Garrison Diversion represents the state of North Dakota in this project. You may wonder why the State Water Commission doesn't do this. Well, there's a long tortured history of this project and it started out with Garrison Diversion. And so the state, when we finally started making some headway, decided that since Garrison knew all the particulars of the project, that they would just leave it with Garrison. One of our major partners, of course, is Lake Agassiz Water Authority. They represent the users. And so any task order, the money that we spend on this project goes either to one of three committees now of WAWA. They have an operations committee, they have a finance committee, and they have a, Mike, which one am I forgetting? Finance, technical committee. And so all our task orders go through those three committees before they come to either board. And both the WAWA board and the Garrison board have to pass those recommendations before we can spend any money. And then, of course, our third partner is state of North Dakota, which is paying for 75% of the project. And they, of course, watch us through the purse. And plus, they also have the Water Topics Committee. And when the legislature meets, we have to report straight to them. So they keep track of what we're doing and they determine how much money we get or don't get for the project. So, and we would love to add a fourth rate on there in the federal government. We have a bill in Congress right now that Senator Hogan has submitted and it has had its first hearing. And that from what we hear, it went well. But that would get us about another over $400 million from the federal government for the project because 32 miles of the pipe on the west end and the water treatment plant and intake for the project qualify for federal funds because that was what we did a EIS on and got the record of decision. So Senator Hogan is positive, so we remain positive that we'll get those federal funds. And of course, to the users, that means a tremendous boost and lowering the cost of the project to them. Next slide. So this is what the project looks now. In 2016, we went out and talked, the legislature told us to talk to every water system, rural and municipal, between the Missouri River and the Red River. And so we did that in over 100 meetings. And we decided the size of the pipe and everything by those meetings. But in 2016, the project was going to go directly to the Missouri River, and there would have been about 165 miles of pipe instead of 125 now, because the federal government decided to work with us, and we get to take the water out of the canal now. And how that happened was a legal strategy that we had. And so when you're working for the federal government, you have to show them that there is another option and that the state is actually going to do something without it, so you become eligible for the federal project. So we built a $20 million intake on the Missouri River, which a lot of people think is a stranded asset. Not true. We've got customers looking at it right now. Some pipe at Carrington and then the outlet structure south of Cooperstown. By doing that, we demonstrated to the federal government that we had another option besides them. They came to the table then, and now they have decided to work with us. And so we have moved up to the canal. And even though we spent $20 million on an intake that probably will be lightly used, that $20 million saved us $3 million construction costs. So we're still about $280 million in on the deal. So it still is a good deal. Total cost of the project right now in 2024 dollars, $1.26 billion. It's a 6-foot pipe, concrete lined, spiral welded steel, and at maximum flow is designed to flow at 165 cubic feet per second. It will always flow once completed at about 6 cubic feet per second to keep the water fresh in the pipe. And we have to have about a minimum, North Dakota gets cold once in a while. We have to have a minimum of 7 feet of soil over the top of the pipe. So some of the pipes are getting pretty deep in the ground. Next slide. So the project benefits are supplements inadequate or existing surface water supplies during the drought. And Fargo and West Fargo have been using Devil's Lake quite a bit for their water supply during dry periods because Devil's Lake is overflowing right now. Well, we all know that Devil's Lake is on a cycle and at some point is going to go down and we'll not be able to get water on the Cheyenne River. And so when we get into a droughty period like that, we definitely need some type of a supplemental water supply. It also limits helps in limited groundwater supplies. The Department of Water Resources has a slide out on when they give a presentation that basically shows that the groundwater in North Dakota is pretty much appropriated out by them, and there really is very limited groundwater left. There is some groundwater, but it's usually deep and salty. And so the easy, cheap water is gone in the state. So if we're going to have industrial development, we need another water supply. So that's another purpose of it is industrial water supply. Legislature looked at that. We are one of the most agricultural states in the nation, and we add value to very little of our crops. We ship it out of state and then we buy it back. So it would mitigate fluctuations of water availability. If you look at the Homer drought chart, North Dakota's never normal. We're either awash in water or very short of water. It's just the way our climate is here. And so if you have water, you just have other economic developments that come. Next slide. So this is the last regional water supply in the state of North Dakota, central and eastern North Dakota. The Western area water supply, they continue to build out on that. The Northwest area water supply, which started all the lawsuits that was tied up in court with Missouri for 16 years. And they're projected next year to provide Missouri River water to Minot. And then the South Line Pipeline project is already in operation, and they continue to upsize that because they have so many people that are signing on to it. So the central and eastern part of the state is the last part of the state to get its major regional water project. And this project has the potential to serve about 50% of the population of North Dakota. Next slide. So we'll talk about the project history and need. Next slide. So this is kind of a timeline of the project. And so the Missouri River was pretty much uncontrolled and would flood terrible. And they did it a lot, all the way from Missouri up to Montana. And so Congress decided that we had to tame the Missouri River, and that's so the Flood Control Act of 1944 was passed. What I find interesting about that is the United States was still in a world war, and we had a Congress that was able to pass a major water project with 5 main stem dams and control the Missouri River. So in 1955, Garrison Diversion was formed by the North Dakota legislature to be the paymaster for the federal government. And so construction of the pipeline began in the 60s and then continued through to the 70s before it was stopped by an agreement in the federal government in Canada. We went to construction in 2021, I believe it was. And at that time, we were still in the 165-mile pipe area. We finally got the record of decision from the federal government, so we were able to move the canal. So the project has had a long and tortured history, and we're finally, maybe within about 8 years, of finally delivering Missouri River water, which we were promised in 1944 and gave up over 500,000 acres of prime river bottom land to get the Lake Sakakawea on it. Now, a lot of people don't even remember that anymore. But we gave up over 500,000 acres of land with the promise of water supply, hydroelectric power, and some other things, a lot of irrigation. And very little of that has ever come to fruition. And the water supply, which was one of the main interests for the state of North Dakota for the project, to give up all that territory, it's never occurred, but we think we're maybe close. Next slide. So this is just kind of a slide to show you how quickly the weather changes in North Dakota. We all know Daryl Richardson, and he said we live in this highly dynamic changing climate. In 1975, the Red River in Fargo went up to the highest point it's ever gone in the summer. The next year, the Red River was dry. That's the reality of where we live. So you can see nobody was in drought July 12th, of 2022. In March 21st of 2023, less than a year, the whole state was in some form of drought. And then in December, we were out of drought, most of the state, but some of the states still was in drought. That just shows how quickly things change in North Dakota. Next slide. This just shows some of the industrial water demands that exceeds current supply in North Dakota. We've actually lost some business to other states because we couldn't provide the water for them. Specifically, soybean plant went to Aberdeen, South Dakota, because we couldn't supply the water that they wanted. They looked at North Dakota. The interesting is after they went to Aberdeen, South Dakota, they contacted Garrison and wanted to know if they could get any water out of the Red River project because now they were short of water for any more industrial development. So we went down there and talked to them, and eventually they decided that they would have their own project and go to the Missouri River because they didn't think they could get enough water from us for what they were hoping for development. And so they're putting, I was at a conference this week and they are putting pipe right in the ground right now, heading towards the Missouri. So a lot of people looking at the Missouri right now. Next slide. So what we had to do to get our permit from the Corps of Engineers to be working in the Missouri River is we had to be modeling. And so we hired an outfit out of Colorado. They know a little bit about water modeling in Colorado. And they worked with us in A2S, and what they found out is if this project had been in place in the 50s, it would have been used every decade since then. And we've had drought periods in every decade since the 50s, and this project would have been turned on and used since the 50s. So there is some reason to try to get this project done as quickly as we can. Next slide. Next slide. So we try to keep the project as affordable as we can. $1.26 billion project, it's hard to keep it affordable. I mean, that's a lot of money. And all the population's on the eastern side of the state. And so it's hard to get the rest of the state engaged in a project and we don't want it to turn into a Fargo and Grand Forks project. And just as a word of warning, our next governor is going to be a Western governor, and both majority in the state are going to be from the West. And I know those people personally, and believe me, the Red River project is not number one on their priority list. And so we're all going to have to work pretty hard to keep it going. And we'll benefit up to 50% of the population when done. That depends on the signups. And another thing that'll happen is if we do get into another 30-style drought, the economic impact and loss to the state of North Dakota without the project is over $33 billion. So even though the project is $1.26 billion, it's very cost benefit ratio good for the state of North Dakota. And that's why they continue to work on the project to try to stave off anything that would happen like that. When I was first elected to the legislature in 1991, we had a large contingent come down from Devil's Lake. And they told us that you got to figure out how to get water into that lake because we're losing our fishing industry, we're losing our tourist industry, and it's all on that lake. So you need to figure out how to get water into that lake. Well, the only way there was ever to get water into that lake was the Garrison Diversion Project, and that got stopped with agreement with federal government in Canada. And so we really didn't have anything we could do. I got beat, and then I came back in 95 to the legislature. Same group of people came down from Devil's Lake, and they said, you got to get water out of this lake because we're losing our farming industry. For every foot that goes up, we lose 10,000 acres of farmland. And we got to do something. And as all you know, happened then is that the state built the Devil's Lake outlet. We are committed to good stewardship. We know that few inches of topsoil is the most valuable thing that those farmers own out there. So we did hire a soils firm. They come out and they train the contractors, the guys that are digging it up, to know how to tell the difference between topsoil, subsoil, and other soil. So that when we put it back together, it's just as productive in a couple of days as it was before we started. Every day we try to figure out the project is as cheap as we can. And we work with all the users. Fargo and Grand Forks is a big part of that. Figure out ways to cheapen up the project, but it's just a big project, inexpensive, and there's not a lot we can do. And of course, we want to be responsible to the environment. And what we did an environmental impact statement, and we think we can build this project being environmental. Next slide. So this just kind of shows all the cities and rural systems that signed up for the project originally back in 2016. And now we're back. We pretty much have to know if we're in or out by December of this year. We're going into the legislature and they're going to want to know where the project is at. And so we're very hard out every week talking to systems, trying to figure out how we can make it work for them and if they can afford it and all those types of things. And as you can see, we've had 4 or 5 systems have already declined. They've sent us Dear John letters. And so we're down about 6.2 cubic feet per second. Fargo and Grand Forks have said that they'll take the water if nobody wants it. And so we don't blame them. And if they're paying for it, they should have it. Next slide. Next slide. So last session, we had a very good session last session in the legislature. They appropriated us $180 million for this biennium. And of course, it's a 75-25 match. And so with that match, we're up to about $240 million that we can use this biennium for construction. That's $60 million that the users have to come up with. Bank of North Dakota is working with us. The legislature also put enough money in the water infrastructure revolving loan fund to guarantee it. And so that 60 million is from the users will be able to borrow from the Bank of North Dakota for 40 years at 2%. And so that's about as good a terms as you're going to find anywhere these days. It'd be unheard of. So the state is all in on this project and they're really working hard to try to get it to the eastern part of the state. And that's based on a 10-year build using the NDOS. NDOS is just going to the canal. Next slide. So this is kind of where we're at for the 23-25 work plan. Like I said, we have $240 million to work with. 180 million of that is state money. So the yellow boxes are where we're doing engineering, continue to do engineering. The green boxes are where we're in actual construction right now. And the blue box is what we've got shovel ready in case of federal money or some state would have some kind of windfall that nobody anticipates. So we got 3 contractors going right around the Carrington area right now. Next slide. So here's the construction progress. It's too far away for me to read, so I'll kind of let you guys read it. You can see we have 3 contractors going right now, east and west of Carrington. One of them started about 3 miles into Wells County. working back towards the pipe that's already in the ground. And then we've got one west, about 9 miles west, putting pipe in the ground. That's Oscarinda. And then we got Garney right in the center, putting pipe in the ground. So I think we're at about 9 miles right now of total pipe in the ground. Next slide. So this is contract 5B, which is Garney. They're on their third year. That was a 2-year contract. That was this, they're on their third year of their 2-year contract. They'll be here next year. Once we started constructing, if you look at that picture and you see all the sloughs, we found out that there was a whole lot more groundwater than anybody anticipated. And so there's a whole lot more dewatering going on than anybody anticipated. And every time it rains, it shuts us down for a couple of days because they got to pump all that water out. Took us a long time to figure out how to get rid of the groundwater. And so that is kind of why Garney is so far behind. But we think we've kind of cracked that nut and quit raining every other day in Carrington. We get a lot more pipe going. We've really actually had 2 really good weeks now because it's been dry. But that's the contract right by Carrington. Next slide. So this is kind of what the restoration looks like. On the left, you've got the pipeline lined up to go in the ground. Topsoil's been stripped. So that's before they start digging. And on the right, that's been after the pipeline is in the ground and it's been restored and it's been seeded. So you got to really look close to see the differences between the crops. And so we're actually pretty proud of the restoration that we're doing, but it looks pretty good. So this is contract 5C by Oscaranda. That's west of town working towards Gray City and back towards Carrington. They have kind of a unique system. Most of the other contractors are using 50-foot pipes and they're using 25-foot pipes. And instead of hand hauling in a lot of aggregate to put around the pipe, because North Dakota has acidic alkaline soils. And so you have to protect that pipe. You just can't put the same soil back. You have to encase it in special sands and gravels. They're actually using a system which is called cement stabilized sand. And so they've got a $1 million plant set up on an old farmstead where they manufacture this. And then they haul it to the site in a truck, and then that's what they use to encase the pipe. It actually kind of hardens up like concrete, only it's a lot less strong. So if you have problems in the future, you don't have any problems digging through it, but it protects the pipe. We're kind of evaluating that system right now because it also kind of slows them down with getting pipes to ground. So we're kind of trying to determine which is the best way to go. So, but that's interesting. Next slide. That's contract 5D. That's where we started 3 miles into Wells County. That's Karstensen. They're actually a South Dakota firm. And they started this year rather late. They didn't get here until July because they had a project in Texas that they were finishing up on. Then it started raining in Texas where it never rains, and it rained and rained and rained. So they got behind. And so now they just got up to North Dakota in July. And if you take a look at that picture, you can kind of see some more water. And so they've had to deal with water also. That's kind of been one of our big problems. Next slide. So this is what we have completed. On the left is the intake in the Missouri River that we had to build so we get the federal government to work with us. If you look to the top left of that picture and you see that kind of L where the ground comes out, there was a bridge built there and a cofferdam put in, and they had to drill from that white concrete cover there 1,600 and some feet to that coffer well. And it went flawless except for the last day when they were going to break through the cofferdam. One of the pipes came disconnected. And so there isn't much room in that pipe. You're drilling, and all those pipes that are bringing drilling mud in and taking dirt out, the slurry out, and one of their workers had to crawl in that pipe from that hole all the way out to that jetty out there and to connect that pipe before they could break through the cofferdam. I wouldn't want that job. And the center is where we started. That's actually our groundbreaking day. That pipeline contract is done. We had a ceremony out there. Lieutenant Governor came, and that's the first pipe going in the ground. And on the right, there is discharge structure that's south of Cooperstown about 6 miles. And that Cheyenne River is right to the left of that. In fact, you look right north of that contract and you look at the Cheyenne River and the Bible camp that's right across from it. Next slide. So our legislative need is going to be, somewhere in the neighborhood of over $200 million this session. And so we ask anybody that will support us in getting as many state dollars as we can. We know there's a lot of other important water projects in the state, and unfortunately, we all kind of compete for the same dollars. But one of the things I neglected to say when we were looking at the finance slide was the legislature did put into the law $953 million of legislative intent, and that would be the state's share on a 10-year bill. And so, you legislators know that's legislative intent is, isn't where the paper it's written on, but at least it gives an indication of what the legislature has committed to. And so they are committed to the project and we continue trying to execute it. Next slide. And that's it. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer.
Maybe one quick question in the interest of time. There's.
I just wondered if Dwayne would be willing to share those slides.
What?
I'd
Oh,
like-
yeah, we can do that. I
I mean,
think,
that'd be great.
I think you can share.
Yeah, we'll send them up to the committee.
Okay, thanks for all your hard work, Dwayne.
Thank you, guys, and that's excuse myself, so thank you
Thanks
much.
for joining us. Okay, now we'll turn it over to Sean on an update on the airport project.
So as past chair of the chamber board a couple of different times, I always appreciated the importance of this committee and the work that this committee did. Not only for the chamber board, but also for all the members. So thanks for what you do and the time that you invest in this important committee for us. We got a lot of slides and we'll go through quickly. The first one there was the 5 board members. Those 5 board members, we go back one slide. They are selected by the mayor and they serve as many 5-year terms as the mayor desires, ratified by the city commission. So you go to the next slide. Current with our budget established by the state of April 8th, 1969 as an independent political subdivision under the Century Code. And you see it either. You go to the next slide there. We're going to roll through these fairly quickly. 89 publicly funded airports in the state of North Dakota, 8 of which are commercial service. Go to the next slide. That's the airport property boundary that you see there. Our master plan, which is available on our website, so you can go there and see where the areas of expansion are identified on that property. Go to the next slide. Passenger employments, 2023 was the busiest year on record, over 516,000 employments. And this year is also going to be a record. August was the busiest month in the history of the airport back to 1931. July of this year was also the busiest month, but August beat that. We have almost 49,000 enplaned revenue passengers. So all indications are we're going to continue to grow, probably at a pace that's a little quicker than what our FAA projections plan. So you go to the next slide. A little bit there, you see the growth about 35% between 2009 and 2019. 5 carriers that we have now. Keep rolling through these if you want. That's our current destination map that we have right now. Some of those in black are those that we're desiring to continue to work on. Working with, we have a small community air service development grant in partnership with the Convention and Visitors Bureau, along with the Greater Fargo DDC for Charlotte service. American Airlines wrote a letter of support for that grant. Grant's about $500,000, and with local cash, it's about an $800,000 amount that can be used as a revenue guarantee. Atlanta service is something we're working with Delta to get back on a seasonal basis. They took that out as a result of the pandemic, and because of aircraft delivery schedules and pilot shortage, they haven't put that back in the schedule yet, but we're hoping so. LAX on the side, that's where Allegiant has gone for a number of years during the summer. They took that out of the schedule this year and the year before because of issues with Boeing. The Boeing issue with the door created all kinds of issues in the aviation industry. And Allegiant was supposed to have 14 brand new 737s delivered to them by now. They just got their first one this year last week. So they took 30% of their pilots out of the Airbus that they fly all over the country and put them into Boeing 737 training based on the schedule that Boeing had given them. Those pilots are being paid to sit at home until those aircraft show up. So what has happened to Allegiant is that they've pulled back their growth and expansion in markets across the country, but hopefully they'll get caught up here. Sun Country is anticipated to enter the market. Landline is providing that daily bus service right now to Minneapolis, and that's been very successful. We'll be meeting with all of those carriers here in the next month. You go to the next slide here. Cargo is a big thing. As you're aware, UPS and FedEx have their global cargo hubs here in North Dakota for this region. So the entire state of North Dakota is served from Fargo for both carriers, along with West Central, Northwest Minnesota, Northeast South Dakota. And then on Saturdays, both carriers feed Canada, Manitoba. Slide. Development, we can just roll through here. The next one here. This is a little bit of a piece that we put out for the legislature and some of the locals here that just kind of shows the growth and the justification for the passenger terminal expansion project that's right now. You can say we've continued to grow. The passenger terminal expansion that's underway right now is addressing those primary things that you see there. The congestion that we have at the checkpoint, our hold rooms and our circulation within the departure lounge area going between gates. We're adding, like I say, 4 gates, so we'll have a total of 9 at the completion of this project here. Then our baggage makeup area behind the house that the public doesn't see. It'll be a much more streamlined passenger makeup operation for the airlines as you check in at the counter and they take the bags out to the aircraft. It has nothing to do with how fast you're going to get your bag and baggage claim. That's a human function that we don't control. Total cost of the passenger terminal project is at $155.9 million. That includes additional items outside of the passenger terminal, which is the expansion of the apron to accommodate the parking areas for those aircraft that will be going to those new gates. It's also the reconstruction of the current apron that's been in place since 1984. It's past its useful life. And also to fund a pipeline, a force main that will go up to the city's lagoons north of the airport to treat our de-icing fluid, the runoff, not only for the passenger aircraft, but the cargo aircraft. So on the federal side, you can see about 35.9 million local, 60 million state, 60 million federal to get to that 155.9 million there. We're hoping that the passenger terminal project will be completed first quarter of 2027. You can go to the next slide there. You can see the expansion. You can roll through these here. I think everybody's probably seen these online of what it will look like when it's completed. Parking ramp is under construction right now. That's 47.7 million. That is not included in the 155.9 which you saw there before. The goal now is to open that structure on August of 2025. And then the connecting skyway that will go between the structure and the terminal building will not start until 2026 due to the constructability of we need to add some additional lanes out in front of the terminal and so forth so that we get access to put the footing foundations into that skyway. But eventually there'll be a connection between the ramp and the terminal. Next slide there with some views of the parking structure. So the reason that we're here today is for the chamber's support, to gain the chamber's support for what we call generational projects. We are working in conjunction with the Grand Forks Airport and the Dickinson Airport to gain $120 million from the legislature to pay for what we call generational projects. These are projects like runway reconstruction, terminal expansion that happen every 20 to 40 years. So of the $120 million, Fargo is seeking $60 million, Grand Forks is seeking $30 million for a runway reconstruction project, and Dickinson is seeking $30 million for the construction of a new passenger terminal. Dickinson Airport right now, if they move from 50-seat aircraft to 76 aircraft, they cannot accommodate that size aircraft. And that's what's coming at them from the airlines right now is they're going to upgrade the aircraft from 50 seats to 76. They have no way of accommodating that type of aircraft. They also do not have any baggage screening equipment. So all of the luggage is hand checked by the TSA before it goes on board the aircraft. Back in March, the Airport Association of North Dakota that represents all 89 publicly funded airports supports this. This is the #1 priority for the Airport Association is the $120 million request by the 3 airports for these generational projects. We have myself and Ryan Riesinger, the airport director from Grand Forks, and Kelly Braun from Dickinson. I have briefed the North Dakota Aeronautics Commission. They're in full support. We briefed the governor's staff, the Office of Management and Budget. We've met with both the leaders from both sides, Becca Dahl and Haug, Vigasa and Lafleur. And we've communicated with many legislators throughout our districts, and there'll be more informational sessions coming up prior to this session here in January to update the legislators in our regions, respective regions, about the importance of this project. The Aeronautics Commission did include the $120 million in their budget that went to the governor. And the goal is to get it in the governor's budget, and all indications are from Doug is it will be in his budget. We'll see who the next governor will be, but we believe that there will be support there since if it is Kelly, we'll see he's from Dickinson. We believe that there will be support there as well. We cannot build these projects that we're doing right now in the 3 airports without federal and state funding. It doesn't happen. And these are what we call generational projects. And certainly the chamber support and other support from the state will hopefully solidify the need and the requirements that the legislature can provide us those funds that we need to complete the projects that we have. At the same time, for Fargo, in Fargo's case, I can't speak for Grand Forks and Dickinson, we're seeking over 80 million from the federal government and through what's called competitive grants. And just earlier this week, they announced an $8.5 million competitive grant that we were awarded. We were asking for 14 million and got 8, so we're a little bit short there. So local cash will have to make up the difference. And that was to support the force main, the Clyde force main that will go from the terminal building up to the cities of Lewis to the airport from that. So, but there's still a lot of federal money that's unknown. The timing of the federal money is we have an application in now for an airport terminal project grant. This is the 4th round of $1 billion that the federal government set aside for airport terminal projects. They had over $14.5 billion in the requests for $1 billion. And earlier this year, we were awarded 10 million of that. We asked for 19 million and only got 10. This year, we're asking for 17 million and we're hoping to get something greater than 10 million out of the ATP program. And we hope to know that by Thanksgiving of this year. Next year is the final round of the $1 billion that the FAA and the federal government set aside, and we'll put another application for that. It's really a heavy lift for our DC folks to go out and get that money because it is competitive. Airport terminal projects are the very lowest priority for the FAA. So Senator Hogan and Senator Kramer and our congressman, whoever that will be, coming up in the next session of Congress, will have their hands full trying to gather support from the federal government to gain those funds. We're competing with all airports in the country for those limited discretionary dollars that are available. So, like I say, the request is for the chamber, and I know Grand Forks and Dickinson are doing the same, is to support that $120 million request for the generational projects and hopefully be successful, but we can complete the project, lower the cost for the taxpayers. The alternative is if we don't receive the state funds or the federal funds, so we issue a revenue bond. And of course, the revenue bond market right now is probably 5+%, plus all the other fees that go with it. We did receive a $40 million loan from the Bank of North Dakota. The board decided to put all of that towards the parking ramp, which is fine. That'll help to alleviate those costs. But at the same time, we'll have to issue some form of revenue bond from there. Our desire would be for the Bank of North Dakota to take the cap off. We were lucky that we had our application in for 40 million prior to the last legislative session where they capped it out 20 million for each political subdivision. We believe that that cap should be removed. Political subdivisions go before the Bank of North Dakota just as you do for a house or a car loan and just say, here's how much I want, here's my collateral to pay it back. And if you can demonstrate that you can pay it back, it should grant you the loan. There shouldn't be a cap. What questions do you have? Go too fast, but
Yeah. Airport terminal projects are the lowest priority. What is the FAA really focused on then? What are some of their high priorities?
projects that improve safety. So it's the runway protection zones, clear zones, runway reconstruction, taxiway reconstruction, airport lighting on the airfield, not terminal projects.
Okay.
They're very low priority. So it'll take the creativeness of a congressional delegation to convince the FAA and the federal government that our projects were worthy. The good news is they put 10 million of ATP funds towards it. The FAA tends to continue to fund projects that they have skin in the game with. For hopefully in the next 2 years, we'll see that commitment continue.
I'm sure you've been asked this question before, but what would happen if you could try to make it into a regional airport? Would there be any way to get support from Minnesota, since obviously you serve a big chunk of Minnesota?
It can be done, and we've started some preliminary conversations about becoming a regional airport authority, mostly for Cass County.
Mm-hmm.
We had some of those discussions back in 2017. It was attempted back in the 1970s with Moorhead and Clay County, but I all fell apart during his term as mayor. But we'll see. But there is a desire now to go countywide. There's support at the county commission level to do that. We just have to bring the other communities that have airports in Cass County on board to do it.
Would that increase the federal interest in providing money for it if it was presented as a regional airport or would that
It
much
can,
effect?
I think that Grand Forks has some advantages there. There are regional airport authority in Grand Forks and there are others in the state. There are airport authorities, but it'll be a heavy lift to try and get Clay County or Morgan to buy into it.
Sure.
State lines, different federal jurisdictions that you're working with, so, but we'll see. But that is a priority for us to do that.
Would that help, Sean, if I think about the federal ask as well, with the delegation we have in the Minnesota side to help with the support, or have they been briefed and are they supportive of the project, Klobuchar and Smith?
They haven't been yet, but I mean, that's a good point. That's on our to-do list to get to Fishbach and Smith and Klobuchar to gather their support as well as even into South Dakota. So we see a lot of people from Northeast South Dakota that come here, not only for passenger service, but for cargo service as well. So a lot of the constituents are dependent upon our airport. We have the data to show that people from Minnesota are coming here to support it. So I think getting them involved would be helpful, and the chamber can lead to have that happen.
Valley parking.
Yeah, it's kind of a month ago.
Yeah.
Our SP Plus from Metropolis now is the new owner of SP Plus, Starting Valley, and it's been pretty successful so far. $28 a day, you can drop it off at the curb and they'll have your car at the curb when you come. Works out great.
I noticed that it seemed like you were still trying to work to get some flights back online that used to be here seasonally or what have you. So what do you attribute the growth in July and August to? Was it more flights? I've noticed, I mean, now I'm taking an Airbus to and from Denver rather than a CRJ or an Embraer. Is it bigger planes or is it everyone's flying at bigger capacity, higher capacity?
Yeah.
What's the
Larger aircraft, just the continued demand for travel. August, September, traditionally prior to the pandemic, were 70% business traffic, 30% leisure. Now we're about 75-80% leisure year round and the rest is business.
wow?
Business traffic hasn't come back in any way, shape or form.
Interesting.
It's almost non-existent. Microsoft has 120 trips planned this year versus 25 to 26,000 out of Fargo prior to the pandemic. They're not flying. That was their justification for Seattle service, and as soon as Microsoft announced their stop traveling, by and large, that justification went away. So we gave that going back.
Is that typical? Is that what you're seeing in other markets as well as the leisure travel has gotten significantly?
It's nationwide. Business traffic is almost non-existent. I mean, Bobcat is out there doing, we do see some RDOs like Bailey, but it's really not happening. We can blame Tim Brookins from NDSU grad Microsoft for creating Microsoft Teams. So I don't know if you know that Tim was the inventor of Microsoft Teams, NDSU grad, Microsoft engineer here. He manages with 380 some employees from Fargo, but all they do 24/7 is Teams. If you talk to Tim, we did just a few months ago, where they're at with Microsoft Teams technology today, they're about 8 years ahead of what they thought they would be because of COVID. Yeah, appreciate your support on that. I know we'll work with Shannon and others based on what you recommend to the full board, but like I say, we can't complete these projects without assistance from the state and the federal government. They don't happen. That's nationwide.
Well, let us know what you need, going into the legislative session to help you write letter, justify what you're doing.
Absolutely. We appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Okay, now we'll turn it over to Chad on the Keep It Local Coalition.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's been a pretty busy week for me. I was in Killdeer on Tuesday, talked to the economic development folks in Bismarck yesterday, and now I'm here. And so I got here late last night and I was wearing a t-shirt and shorts, and then got into my room and discovered I forgot to wear a shirt. So I was at Target at 7 o'clock this morning to make sure I looked acceptable. And then I walk in and Flacco's wearing this ugly Yankees shirt. So it turns out I could have worn whatever I want. So, again, thank you for having me. I also want to thank the Fargo Moorhead West Fargo Chamber for the incredible support. And kudos to your staff. Kale and everybody else around here has been incredible. You guys do this unique thing. So I'm the chair of this coalition of nearly 100 organizations. The Fargo Moorhead West Fargo Chamber does this weird thing where they actually communicate to their members, which isn't universally true with the other 100 members of this coalition. So kudos to you for that. And so I'm going to go through some slides really quickly, hit on some high points. I think people are sort of aware of the policy, and then go into the strategy, the campaign, and what we're going to see over the next 56 days. Next slide. So here's what we know. We know it's going to be on the ballot. We know that the legislature just put an appropriation on the cost of this of $3.15 billion for the next biennium. $3.15 billion in the next biennium with no plan to replace that money. And so Judy and others will go to the Capitol if this thing passes, spend 80 days, maybe more, to try to figure out how to come up with that sort of revenue. So political subs can't levy taxes based on assessed values, but they do have to reimburse local political subs at the level that they assessed in property taxes in 2024. This is an important point that I'm going to come back to later, because proponents will say, look, you still have local control because the government, the state has to do this. And then I also want to point out something else, that this doesn't just eliminate property tax on people's residential property, right? That's only 36% of property tax on residential property. The rest is on centrally assessed and commercial. And I don't think people understand that. So I want to talk a little bit more about that as well. Next slide. So in Kildare, Rich Wardner joined me. So I didn't have to really go to the budget much because he really dove in deep into all the nooks and crannies. You'll hear the proponent say the state has a $19.6 billion budget. That's true. But if you back out federal funds, which is $6.1 billion, that couldn't be used to replace this revenue. You back out $7.3 billion in special funds, you're left with a $6 billion general fund. And remember what I said earlier, what was the cost of this thing? $3.15 billion. So even Ben Hansen can figure out that that's over 50% of our general fund budget. I noticed you were really paying attention. But also that's over 50% of the general fund budget that the legislature, the very people that the group's pushing this don't trust to do anything about property tax, but they trust to find $3.15 billion. Next slide. Very quickly, you know where property taxes go. They go to schools, they go to cities, they go to counties. They pay for the things that make our communities great, right? And so I think when we talk about not having a plan to replace $3.15 billion, we're talking about replacing money that pay for our schools or law enforcement, all the things that we look for in a community that we want to work and live. Next slide. Okay, so I put this in because it gets a laugh about 1/4 of the time, and that's good for my ego. But when we talk about what's the plan to replace this, you'll hear the proponents say there's so much pork and there's so much other stuff we can just cut and everything will be fine. Trust us. There's not a lot of details. Next slide. You'll see why I used the previous slide because but again, you look at that list, I mean, even on the proponent side, they've came up with $974 million. That's far less than $3.15 billion. So even in the scenario where they're chopping, they still haven't quite figured out how to pay for it. And some of the things they're suggesting there is, you know, getting rid of the prairie dog bill, which helps keep property taxes low. I mean, so it's just, there's a lot of things that just don't make sense. Next slide. Okay, so here's our concern. The state contribution is not required to increase beyond the 2024 levels. We know things cost more money, so you're gonna have to put the legislature hand asking for more money. But the other problem with putting into the Constitution the 2024 levels is not all political subs are created equal. So for example, Montreal County, which is an oil country in western North Dakota, had a big ending fund balance, so they chopped property taxes virtually down to nothing in 2024. What that means is the state will be reimbursing Montreal County at virtually nothing until the end of time if this thing passes. Whereas other counties, unfortunately from my perspective, and political subs decided to ratchet up property taxes. So their rate was higher in 2024 to cover to CYA a little bit if this thing passes to make sure they get. So this measure almost rewards folks who are not being fiscally responsible. The other thing is some political subs have decided to pay for things like parks, sales tax. Williston has a sales tax that helps pay for their park district. That will not be reimbursed by the state. They'll continue to have to pay sales tax in Williston to pay for their parks. But in Bismarck, all of my parks are going to be paid for by the state. It's fundamentally flawed and unfair and poorly thought out. It also lacks quality and stability. I talked about that this isn't just residential property. There are counties in this state, McKenzie County, for example, where 97 of their 100 top property taxpayers are not individuals. They're businesses, they're out-of-state corporations. So I think as people are thinking about this, they're not thinking about that aspect of it. And I think we need to, One Oak is the biggest property taxpayer in McKenzie County. They're opposed to this thing. 97 businesses in McKenzie County will get a tax cut that they didn't ask for. Your members aren't asking for these tax cuts because they know the ability to keep local control and keep our community strong is far more important than the short-term gain of a tax cut. Next slide. So what are we going to do about it? Next slide. So we've been ramping up this campaign for what seems like six and a half years, because we first started meeting when they started collecting signatures. So that would have been June of 2023. We spent that time raising funds and putting the coalition together. As of today, we have 98 coalition partners representing well over 250,000 people in this state. And now it's go time. Right, so we've raised money. I'm gonna do a pitch right now. We have envelopes. This coalition can take money from individuals, from corporations, from anybody but public entities and foreign entities. You're going to see a really aggressive media campaign starting 42 days before the election. We have a paid media budget currently of $1.1 million. So that means we are going to be on television, cable, digital radio, newspapers, digital billboards, everywhere. And so we're confident about what this campaign looks like. We're confident that our coalition partners are communicating with their members about the ramifications of this. But it's really go time now. And I will tell you the state campaign that I chair is going to focus on that paid media and sort of a statewide perspective. But it's really so important that folks in their communities are talking to their friends and neighbors about how it affects Fargo and West Fargo and their surrounding communities. Like I said, I was in Killdeer on Tuesday night. And there's a bunch of people in cowboy hats and farmers and ranchers, and they got it. I mean, they understood how bad this is. But I tell you what, they're going to do a lot better job at the local bar and cafe talking to folks than I would or Flacco would walking into that place, right? You trust your friends and neighbors. Next slide. So here's where you can find out more about the campaign. Facebook. The middle one is LinkedIn. I just learned that about 2 weeks ago. I usually skip that when I do this presentation, but now I know it's LinkedIn, X, and then keepitlocal.nd.org, where you can sign up for updates, donate to the campaign, see all the press that we're generating, and anything else. Next slide. Okay, so here's what we know from polling. I will tell you we're going back in the field on Monday with another poll. When you ask people, you want to get rid of property taxes, about 50% say yes, they want to get rid of property tax. When you say, do you want to get rid of property taxes with no plan to replace $3.15 billion in revenue, about 25% of those people move our direction. So again, the paid media efforts, the education component is really, really important here. I think if the election were held today, we'd probably win by 10 or 15 points. You know, there are some things in terms of turnout and not a lot to motivate people to get out to vote, which has me a little bit concerned. I'll be honest, I'm a little concerned about Cass County having a bunch of, or Fargo, having a bunch of different measures, having to do taxes all on the ballot at the same time, and all that will play out. But generally speaking, if we educate folks, they're going to come our way, because North Dakotans understand if something sounds too good to be true, it usually is. And they also like to have a plan before they jump out of an airplane. Next slide. So again, I have hit on these things: state funding, no plan for execution, and then local control. Man, when I'm out talking to rural areas and I ask them to think about how many members of the legislature Cass County has compared to what they have, it lands every single time, right? I mean, if Killdeer needs a new fire truck and Fargo needs a fire truck, I can count up to 33 and know that Cass County is probably going to get that fire truck. And I think it's also interesting that when I'm in rural communities, they don't trust that the urban areas are going to vote right. And when I'm in urban areas, I don't trust that the rural areas are going to vote right. That's a really, really good tension, I think, to have where everybody's going to work really hard to vote no on this thing. Next slide. So what can you do? The left side is what the coalition is doing, continuing to raise money, develop the media pieces. But what you can do is on the right side is put up a yard sign Kale's got yard signs at the office. Maybe they're here. I don't know. Okay, very good. I gotta be honest, generally speaking, I sort of am annoyed by yard signs because most people, when they go and vote, there's a D or an R on the ballot. So they already have something that's sort of educating them on where they want to go. On a measure campaign, on nonpartisan races, I think they actually matter a lot. And we're seeing places that have yard signs up, neighbors are saying, so what's that measure for thing? And it starts a conversation. So please get up yard signs everywhere you can. Connect to the stuff online, write a letter to the editor. It might be a little bit late for that because some of our friends in the newspaper business don't charge for these things, and I'm not sure that's the best use. But if you want to write a letter to the editor and spend your money to write a letter to the editor, we would welcome it. Distribute campaign materials. I think, Kale, do you guys have brochures at the office? Okay, we'll get you some brochures as well. Just it's a nice little thing that folks can talk about.
Are they electronic as well? Those brochures?
I think they might be on the website. We're gonna send some out that we could tailor to, I think, talk about. Okay, yeah, I'll circle back with Ally to make sure that takes place. And then donate to the coalition. Again, we're having good fundraising, but it's not like we are going to be running. I always say that Kelly Armstrong leading up to the primary was at about 1,000, 1,500 gross rating points per week. We're at about 1,500 for the duration of the campaign. And so I think adding more to our media budgets are always a really good thing. So again, next slide. I like to end with this. People are sometimes uncomfortable talking to their friends and neighbors about anything political. Just want to point out you're not alone. When you start thinking about ag groups and energy groups, lignite, petroleum, RDCs, ag groups like farmers unions, stockmen, grain growers, pretty much every commodity group, although I did hear Farm Bureau came out in favor of the measure last night, which was disappointing but not shocking. Real estate, we've got statewide, all the locals, you've got the statewide builders, all the local builders. You've got ARP. I love when people say that, we're taxing seniors out of their homes. That should not happen if people are aware of the homestead tax credit and the different things that the legislature has put in place. There's a reason why ARP and senior service providers and senior groups are opposed to this thing. You can go through the list: education, public health, healthcare. I will just say healthcare has come in really big in the last few months because we've got hospitals, we've got docs, we've got nurses, we've got long-term care. It's very clear if you look at the state's budget, if we lose $3.15 billion, healthcare is going to absolutely be just hammered next legislative session in terms of Medicaid expansion, reimbursement rates. And those organizations know that and are part of this conversation, making sure their staff and their customers are aware of that. So a really incredible coalition. In this day and age, to have 98 groups come together, 100 groups come together to agree on anything is really remarkable, but it's also fun, right? It's fun to have people who are fighting on behalf of our communities, help push in the right direction. So I'd be happy to answer questions or have a conversation or take advice from some of you. Ben, from some of you.
$3.15 billion every 2 years.
Yeah.
786,000 people in the state, roughly. That's about $4,007 per person. So if somebody says they're thinking of voting yes, ask them for that amount of money, because that's what it's.
Well, and I also, the 3.15 doesn't even count in LUBA, right? I mean, if you start getting to a point where RECs and oil, if I were them and I'm paying something in lieu of property taxes don't exist anymore, I'm gonna have a little bit of a problem with that. So I think that number might go up.
I mean, you're very accurate in the loss of local control. When I was in the education committee, I mean, there was people in the legislature that wanted to pick prom colors when they only controlled 35% of the cost of education. But my question is, because, I went to Forbes.
I didn't know that. You're from Forbes, you say.
So when Forbes proposed, it went to different districts. So have they said what their plan is? Because in the last 25 years, we've lost 50 school districts. What happens to that base amount when they kind of spread to the winds in terms of saying, we guaranteed you this much, but your school district doesn't exist anymore?
Tim, I will tell you that they do not have a plan for anything, let alone something to that level. But I think you bring up a good point about rural school districts, right? I mean, again, you're going to Bismarck and singing for your supper. Rural school districts are going to struggle. They're already struggling to figure out how to recruit and retain teachers and to keep their doors open. And we all know when a school closes, a community is in a lot of trouble. And so when we think about rural and urban, there are real issues here on both sides of this. Senator?
Please, Judy is fine. We're not in a place with a point.
Okay.
I think that Sesame Street really has it right when they repeat stuff so that little kids learn it. And I think the same thing is true for Grumman. And with people beginning to talk about very soon, registering to get absentee ballots or voted home ballot, because the counties are really good at getting that information out. I think we've got to be there ahead of the loop too, because people, I have voted all 3 ways just because I think it's good to try. People have learned that they kind of like to get a paper ballot and sit at their kitchen table and kind of think this out rather than having 2 minutes in the booth. So I think all of that becomes really important. The other thing is with 2024 and a constitutional amendment, please vote in favor of the changes for the Constitution.
What does that measure?
I can't remember, but it's so crappy now because 2024 means it goes on in perpetuity.
Right.
Until another 36 to 40,000 people sign a petition to put it back on the ballot and change the date.
Right. Yeah. That's exactly right.
On your sidekick.
I know. No, I hope everybody in here.
Voting 14 days.
Yes, voting. So I want to touch on that. We are starting our media right before early voting starts. But in addition, again, talking about yard signs, talking about some of those things, we're going to do digital billboards to get even more off. I also think it's a presidential election. We're going to have a pretty large percentage of maybe less informed voters going out. So really getting in front of them, no one for means bad for schools, no one for means bad for law enforcement. That sort of simple message is something to make sure we get out there before that 40 days. Benjamin.
Obviously, you want to defeat it, and I think everybody in this room does too. Is there any talk with this group about any kind of lawsuit or post-election day activity, considering how catastrophic this would be?
We're going to defeat it and then talk about that afterwards. But I will say one of the things that often is brought up at these presentations is, if not this, what? And I will tell you, we have 98 groups that have agreed that this is a bad idea. There's no way in hell we're going to get 98 groups to agree on what's the better solution.
Yeah.
But there are certainly organizations within the coalition. We're having conversations with elected leaders and other folks. I know there's serious conversations going on with Congressman Armstrong about what he wants to do next session. What I tell people is I am confident something substantial will be done on property taxes next session.
I'm made for local control, so
Yep.
we'll see.
Yep, there we go. Well, between now and election day, I'm confident something really big is going to be done on property taxes.
And you know, what we're up against from the media spend on the other side and that kind of, do you have any?
So I was the campaign manager when this was on the ballot in 2012, and we spent 6 months waiting for the shoe to drop, and it never dropped. Up to this point, all indications are they don't have a huge sum of money, that they just ordered 1,000 yard signs, and we're very happy about that. And so I think at this point, we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars. I don't know what Farm Bureau getting involved in this thing means. I will tell you in Dunn County, Farm Bureau leaders there who very much oppose this thing. So I don't think it's going to be universal. But at this point, no indication of large spends. I will tell you for the last 6 months, we've been saying the two variables that we're concerned about is one, when estimated property taxes drop. And that happened in the last couple of weeks. Most urban areas were okay, that they weren't huge leaps. Some rural areas had huge jumps. And so I think that's going to be okay. And then the second variable is somebody going to come in here and drop $2 million to try to make North Dakota sort of the guinea pig for the rest of the country. So I want to make it clear, no other state in the country's done this. No other place in the world has done this. I would encourage people, the Tax Foundation, which is the National Right of Center organization, just put out a great piece on why this is a terrible idea. They also testified before the legislature last week about why this would be economically bad for the state of North Dakota. So Google Tax Foundation, North Dakota Property Taxes, and you'll find the article. It's really good. And he was a guest on the Rob Port podcast yesterday with great co-host Chad O'Ben.
All right, thanks, Chad. Good info today. So we'll move on, but if you have questions for him afterwards, just connect with us. We'll turn it over to Rob with the Fargo Dome update.
Morning, all. Thank you. Rob Sullivan, General Manager, Fargo Dome. I know time is short, so I'm gonna run through this really quick. Fargo Dome expansion remodel project is back on 1% sales tax. Question, we feel that this is a comprehensive plan that addresses multiple priorities with enhancing the patron event experience, helps an asset management, preservation, a very large asset for the city of Fargo, as well as helping to maintain and increase the relevance of the building and the events that happen at the building or could happen in the building into the future. This plan, you can just flip the slide. Next slide infuses existing Fargo Dome permanent funds of $30+ million. It also, through the sales tax, allows for visitor contributions, people to come not only to Fargo Dome, but come to the city of Fargo for different things that the Fargo Dome may have played a role over the last 35 years in helping to create. The sales tax, the 0.25%, so about 25 cents on $100, really is the only viable amount of money to collect. When we looked at other things, whether it's an additional ticketing tax, well, the realistic side of that is even if you put a 5% tax on all ticket revenue, that's about $15 million in gross ticket revenue. That 5% equates $750,000. So the funds are just not there for the type of project we're looking at with remodeling about 107,000 square feet and adding about 120,000 square feet or 110, so about 225,000 square foot. Phase construction with the venue to remain open the vast majority of the time. This last one, it's actually net neutral and permanent seats, but a gain in parking spots with the change of the configuration without the conference center added to it. There'll be a gain in the next slide. So, the main priorities are improving and enhancing the accessibility, updating all of the existing restrooms. I know that's not sexy, but they need to do it for building codes. Also adding and enhancing and increasing the accessible seating and accessible options throughout the building, both horizontally and vertically. But the focus is also on the event patrons and their experiences they come. Additional restrooms, particularly on the female side, nearly doubling, from about 139, adding about 128 female restrooms. Male restrooms, I'm sorry, we're more efficient, but it's adding about 90 restrooms. And also more family restrooms throughout the concourse. Creating additional seating areas, whether it's club areas, both on all three different levels, field level, mezzanine level, the press box level on the west side, creating more seats. Also to keep that seat net neutral, changing over some unused space on the north end over to regular stadium seats. Creating greater circulation areas throughout the entire facility, mainly on the concourse area, to help with congestion at high traffic areas, but also to create just those socialization areas, those gathering areas for when you're at an event. It's not always about the event. It's about sometimes being seen at the event or hanging out with your colleagues at the event. And you really can't do that at Fargo Dome now. This will allow that with several different spaces. And what has become a hot feedback topic, which I can agree or disagree with. It doesn't really matter what my opinion is, but we will be all new stadium seats throughout the facility, a lot more LED enhancements and signage and interactions, things such as that. So we have samples of the seats, that different variety of seats that would be used. Those are on display at Fargo Dome up in the lobby right now. So when you come out, hopefully for an NDSU homecoming game or before that, you can take a look at the different seating options there. And the other side of it is with the food and beverage. How do we monetize a lot of this? Also through that, probably adding by 2/3 the amount of points of sale, which allows us not only more sales,
more revenue to generate and support the overall facility, but bring in more local products, increase our lines. Our food and beverage department's doing a great job right now, adding in local companies right now, such as Cowboy Jacks, Brewbird, Bahana Fresh, already in, but we can expand that even more, plus create the other areas for the different type of amenities people are looking for. And I know which a lot of people don't, they glaze over, it's the operational efficiencies to make it work. Similar to baggage handling things with the airport, different things such as that, it works with all that. Next slide. So the sources of funds, as I said earlier, $30+ million will come out of this from the Fargo Permanent Fund. That's about 70 to 75% of that fund would be put towards this. That's the fund that's been invested with the North Dakota Investment Board for that, and then also the 1/4% of 1% for 20 years. The uses of that will be to do the total remodeling project that we've mentioned, also to help sustain that permanent fund again for future capital expenditures such as it already is doing, which, you know, in today's world, between the bonding and bond payments and work is about $1.5 to $2 million a year. Other than that, it's just a couple of pictures. On the next slide of the interiors, that's upper left, southeast corner. The brick wall you're looking at is actually the outside of the building right now, but that will all become interior space. Again, you can kind of see a gathering bar, social atmosphere there. The steps on the left will lead up to a club level. That'll be in that southeast corner that will overlook the field. On the bottom right picture there is a picture of the west side, where the suite and club level would be with the LED ribbon board that right now would be planned to kind of move all the way throughout the entire facility. The upgrade to the seats, different things such as that, and then just a couple of exterior renderings on the next page to kind of give a schematic of what it could look like. Upper left is looking from the southeast, and so you can see the changes around to the southeast corner and through that's carried down to the field level for extra areas, whether it is mostly for concerts or trade shows when the floor is loaded with a lot of people, so they have extra amenities to take them off of having to come to the concourse. For NDSU football or other events, it's a field club space that can be accessed. And on the west side, looking from the southwest, I'm getting even more excited about this area. I realize people are going to say, well, now you're going to be a Broadway Square. But it takes that tailgating Thunder Alley festive atmosphere and moves it to the pool. The building will come out to Albrecht Avenue, so Albrecht as a through street will be closed. But that creates all of that energy up onto the building plaza right out in front of it, with a balcony on the second level from a space. Actually, I'm missing the meeting right now, but they're pitching an existing sponsor for that corner where you see a sponsor sign, and imagine some outdoor signage, which the authority is looking at the evaluation process for naming rights for the building or other ways to help, and that'll all help play in the role, but it doesn't fund the project itself. But it could help to pay off earlier. So imagine not only NDSU football, but pre-events for rodeos or concerts, post-events at the time of year, or even just non-event days, and that space is activated with revenue generation and different community activities that you don't have to close down 17 streets to set up booths or park. You have enough parking on site to do those types of things. Time is short. You know, the ask, as it's always been, is, you know, for the chamber and their groups for the support of that, which I know we have, but also talk to your friends who live in the city of Fargo. As we say, about 50 to 55% of the visitors to the events at Fargo Dome are, we call non-local, which is that 30-mile radius. When you shrink that 30-mile radius down to the city of Fargo, I think it's fair to say that well over 70% of the visitors to the Fargo Dome are non-local, which will then help fund these improvements.
Rob, two things. I hope you have cup holders.
The seats have cup holders, yes.
Yeah, both from a fan standpoint and just from the custodian that cleans up.
Yes.
A question sometimes I'm asked is the funds, they're so-called non-transferable to, say, the Fargo Civic. That's one of the most common questions.
At this time, the home rule charter amendment that was put in place says that it is a building that is on or adjacent to the Fargo Dome and affiliated with Fargo.
It's affiliated.
That's the language, and that's where I walk out of the interpretation to say that's somebody else's call. Which also can, as I always point out, just like this is a public vote, anything can be changed with public. It's part. I have thoughts in my mind when you bring up that building, but they'll remain quiet at this time.
Any other questions for Rob?
Again, time is short. If you have any questions on this, please reach out to myself. David Supas, the Fargo Dome Authority president, is down here. He's got the hockey here. Happy to discuss any of this. And if you have ways or thoughts on how to get the word out, how to present different things, I think it's important. The building's been almost 35 years. It's going to go for another 35 years. So this is into the future. And how do we remain relevant, but also increase that relevance, whether it is type of events, event events, different things such as that.
Thanks, Rob. Now, best for last. Is that how that works, Charlie?
Yeah, that's a different program, but thanks for mentioning it. So as Rob pointed out, we've separated the votes this time, and we asked the city commission, and they granted our request to put a 3-cent additional lodging tax in place to help us fund a convention center somewhere in the city. We're going not location specific in this case, but the way the measure is written is to allow for the city, if it passes, to set up a committee to run an RFP process seeking a public-private partnership to build convention space somewhere in the city of Fargo. So you can go to the next slide. Otherwise, I'll just riff. So, that's on. It would go from 3 cents to 6 cents in the city of Fargo. Currently, a person staying in a hotel room in Fargo right now pays a total of 10% tax on that room. So it's 7.5% state and local sales tax and 3% lodging tax. So if ours passed, it would take it up to 13.5. And if both of the quarter-cent sales tax that are currently proposed went into place, it would take it up to 14%, which is basically the national average of taxes on hotel rooms, based on research by HVS that I've seen recently. It's about what it is in Minneapolis. There are some places where it's higher. My counterpart from Ames yesterday reminded me they have a 7% lodging tax in Ames. Des Moines has a 9% lodging tax. So we're okay in that regard. To go to 6% is not crazy. So the idea is to generate funding for the convention center. Our big message is that this is a tax paid, I think, 98 to 99% by people who do not live in this community. So that gives us a slight advantage over your 70% or whatever you choose to say it is. It's basically a user fee masquerading as a lodging tax. And that's the message we really need to get out to people, that you're not, if you vote for this as a citizen of Fargo, you are not actually paying much of this at all. And so we're aiming to create a public-private partnership. You can go to the next slide, please. To create this meeting space. Penny on the lodging tax right now, Susan has been through this with me many times. Right now, a penny on the lodging tax, Fargo only, raises about $1 million a year. So $3 million. I asked Susan when we asked to move this from 20 years to 25 years to increase the bonding capability. And the last time I checked with Susan, based on today's interest rates, which we hope will get better, I think most people think they will get better next year or so. But based on today's interest rates, she figures we could bond about $14.5 million. I like to round that up to 15 because it will get better. So basically, we'd have about $45 million bonding capability. When I talked to the developers who asked me about this project, and I've been approached by several, I suggest to them that they should think in terms of $38 or $40 million contribution from the city, because we want to hold out part of this lodging tax to cover what will undoubtedly be an operating deficit for a facility like this. No convention centers that I'm aware of in the world actually make money. The Fargo Dome as an arena is an anomaly, the way it's thanks to Rob's operation of it, I'm sure. And that won't be the case. They're not going to make money. So we will need an operating subsidy, but probably at least $500,000 a year. Our board, by the way, if you're concerned about that, so if we could save a half penny out, we'd have about $500,000 a year for operating. Our board knows that if it goes above that, we are ready to step in and use part of our capital, our existing 3% lodging tax to help offset that too, if necessary, and if we could afford that going forward. So the other good thing about us separating from the Dome project is the 3% lodging tax only needs a 50% vote. So we've separated the issues. You can go to the next slide. I think you all know how the lodging tax works. We are currently funded, Visit Fargo Moorhead and West Fargo is currently funded by the existing 3% lodging tax in all three cities. Obviously, this will only be in Fargo that we would be increasing it. We do a lot of, I believe, a lot of good things with the money that we have now. We certainly promote the community. We have marketing budget. We promote the leisure tourists. We promote internationally the leisure tourists. We promote a meetings business, which falls short because we can't accommodate all the meetings that we could get. And then we promote aggressively in the sports area because that's where our biggest facility options lie. And we've done well with that. In 2023, we estimated about $40 million in direct visitor spending from sporting events that our team touched, compared to about $11 to $12 million for meeting direct visitor spending. I believe that within 3 to 6 years, we would at least double that direct visitor spend on the meeting side if we had decent convention space. So basically if this passes, the committee that gets set up would be talking to developers about a $40 million contribution, and then what are you going to bring to the table? And that's what we would be looking for. Okay. Everything is job creation, right? Anything that brings people to the community relates to job creation. It all starts with a visit, as my friend Moira Gass said years ago. We know that we promote the same things that the Economic Development Corporation promotes to bring people to town to live. It's the same stuff that we're selling to visitors. So we've been involved in the workforce issue for quite a long time now as well. And the message that we, of course, want to get to the community is whatever new direct visitor spending comes into the community goes directly into the economy. It filters through the economy. And I know last time we had this vote, we had a hard time getting people to draw that straight line from a lodging tax or from a meetings business or business at the Fargo Dome to draw a straight line down to your mechanic, but it's there. You can absolutely draw the straight line because it creates more business in the community. And if it helps bring more people to live in the community, that also creates more business. So, and also it gives us an enhanced community profile. I've made this point many times before. Every visitor that comes to the community is potentially someone who might think, hey, I could live there or open a business there, right? But I would posit that people who come here for meetings, who are actually here generally for a business purpose, if it's business related or association, if they're thinking more in terms of business while they're here, so they might be just a little more interested in seeing if it's a place they want to do business. That's my own personal opinion. I have no data to back that up. But I'll stand by it. Okay, and we have a whole list of meetings and conferences that we could have interested or enticed to come here, but then they find out we don't have space for them. That's why we really need this. Remember, it's a user fee masquerading as a lodging tax. You will not be paying much of it unless you bring, grandma and grandpa in, get them a hotel room. Okay, fine. That doesn't end up. Questions? This is the PowerPoint we're going to use for service close. And let me tell you this too. Speaking of advertising, our board initially they approved a $50,000 informational advertising campaign. We can't directly advocate. But last week, the board agreed to up that to about $95,000. So we have a pretty aggressive media plan, informationally speaking, and we've run this by our lawyers. So I think we're dancing on the line. We'll see how it goes, but you'll be seeing, some of you may already be seeing some of our social and digital media ads. We'll get more into traditional media once we get closer to the election. And that will include television and radio.
Thanks, Charlie. I'll throw it over to Kale quick for some announcements if you have any.
Yeah, I would just encourage everybody to take a look at the agenda, see the upcoming chamber events that we have, the Pulse, which is formerly Eggs and Issues, will be happening next week. So just encourage you all to head over to Microsoft and check that one out. And then we have a number of different events. Annual celebration is coming up, annual committee celebration. So we've actually separated the kind of the committee part of annual celebration and really wanted to dedicate some time to our committee leadership and our committees. And so there will be a celebration the evening before our annual celebration for committees specifically. In addition to some election events that we have going on, you'll obviously see more of that as we get closer to those, but we'll start pushing those out. Then as well as some upcoming committee meetings. Penix will have a hold on Kelly Armstrong's campaign calendar for a roundtable next month, along with kind of starting to draft our legislative priorities. And so we can get those to the board for their approval and get those distributed in an eloquent manner. Then doing some election recaps, mandate update about Minnesota, and then kind of finalizing those priorities in November. And then in December, looking at doing a session preview and still talking about the upcoming legislative sessions in both North Dakota, Minnesota, and federally. So.
Kale is the 7th.
Kale, I'm just curious because the information is that the Cracker Barrel is going to be in Dilworth, and yet you have 3 events for Clay County, Moorhead, and Dilworth candidate forums, and nothing for those that are in Cass. And it seems to me that Dilworth is not the ideal location. I don't see their name on that slide. Not that I want to exclude Dilworth, but I would certainly suggest that there might be something that was more accessible for the people who really want to come to a Cracker Barrel over here and say, oh, I don't want to Dilworth. I realize that's a bad attitude. I'm just saying, why are there 3 for Moorhead and Clay and Dilworth and nothing for Cass?
Appreciate that feedback. We're definitely looking into it. And I'll definitely get back to you on that, Senator.
We've heard that from some others as well.
I would think so.
Any other announcements?
Paul, what were you asking?
Well, the Pulse is on the 17th, correct? It says the 8th on our agenda, but there's not one in October as well, or is that there's one?
Yes, there is one in October as well. Yep, so it's a monthly series, the Pulse.
Just like Eggs and Issues was in the past. So the thing with Eggs and Issues, now we've revamped it. It's going to be a lot more interactive with the audience, participants that are there, hosted now at Microsoft, and topics format of it will be much different. So we do have one on September 17th and another one on October 8th. The October 8th agenda that we're putting together for the Pulse will be understanding your ballot. And so we will be going through some of these topics in a lot greater detail for a lot broader audience. So.
Yeah.
Any other announcements from the group? Well, we thank you all very much for your time and commitment. We know this was a longer one, so we had a lot of good info. Appreciate all our presenters. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
They know how to I don't pray on station.